Good, good. As good as can be.
Yeah, same.
I know it's so good to connect with you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm
Yeah,
very honored.
thank you, and thank you so much for taking time out. Because I realize that time is something that's so precious to us nowadays. Considering everyone is at home.
Yeah.
Well, at least in Nigeria, we're on lockdown. Can you please tell us where you are?
So I'm in London, where we are also on lockdown. I mean, the recommendations are very definitely to stay home. Yeah. Harder when the weather is so lovely, but I'm certainly staying safe at home. I'm in wardrobe as we speak. I couldn't be more.
Oh, that's so cool! Cool. So yes, I think we've been on lockdown for a week today. There's probably going to be another week we have another week to go.
Yeah.
And the governments might make further recommendations that we still stay home, but we're still keeping our fingers crossed and watching it because this is completely new, I guess, to everyone. This feeling, this crisis, this pandemic, that's wow. I don't even. Sometimes, for me, it's the feelings come and go. Sometimes I'm so hopeful that we have a chance to do something new, to rewrite history, just to be part of the revolution, to do better and be better. And sometimes or some days I wake up so anxious. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? When you watch the tracker and you just see the death toll rising up and you feel so helpless. And
I think it's impossible really to be measured. I sort of switch in between one and the other, same way. My main fear is that, there is so much that we need to do, to learn, to improve, and it often happens that after a period of restriction, we go back to excess.
Of course.
So that's obviously, I think, why it's more important than ever that we meet, that we speak, that we share experiences, and that we reiterate the fact that we need to make a better world, we need to make a better industry, because the risk is that the minute we're let out, we'll go back to excess as usual, which is obviously what we're hopefully, what we all want to avoid, excess and not respecting the people who make our clothes, and all of this. All of these things are so visible right now, so visible to the naked eye, really.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. I mean, for me, I've followed your work closely for quite a while now, and I'm a fan of,
Thank you.
Not just the vision, but the whole movement and the need for us to do better and be better. Even with the people that we work with at SHF Trains, which is a facility for providing opportunities for skills development for employability. We talk about your work, and it's one of the things we've incorporated so that they feel valued as well. So often last year we celebrated, I think, our first Fashion Revolution Week, which was really, it was really quite special, and they're looking forward to it today. So I wanted to. There we are. We're looking forward to it. So I wanted to start by asking you to please share your journey with us. Tell us about the vision, where did it come from, and all the good stuff.
So Fashion Revolution was born out of a tragedy, the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh. The original idea came to Carrie Summers, the other founder, and she had this idea in the bus and literally called me straight away and emailed me, and we'd known each other. The full team at Fashion Revolution, all of us, come from a fashion background. And we were all activists before. We all worked in the field of sustainability in one way or another. And we all felt really powerless after Rana Plaza. Like, everything that we'd done or thought or dreamt of suddenly collapsed. The whole of the fashion industry crumbled when that building crumbled. The facade was over. And so we just got together, and really wanting to start something stronger and bigger. And we never knew that it was going to be so successful, certainly not at the very start. And I can tell you that, Fashion Revolution is a brilliant movement, and I love it from the bottom of my heart, but it's because it's run by brilliant people. And, this is how we operate on a global scale. Most of our country coordinators, if not all of them, but they certainly all started as volunteers, and we're on this journey together. We would never have done it just on our own, and we would never have presumed that we could have done it just on our own, because as people we're all different, and the world we inhabit is all different in different places. And so I think what is so important about Fashion Revolution is that we are all together on this journey with all of our individual experiences, because that's what makes the unity, and that's what will create change. Because I need to hear from you and what is needed in your area, your people, your followers, your communities, and this repeated globally. So this is Fashion Revolution. And the journey, as our mission statement says, is we want to see a fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and that values people over profit. We're very far from seeing this now, particularly, with the coronavirus, but that's the mission, and that's what we're all walking towards.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I liked something that you said, which is very valuable and very important for today. You talked about Fashion Revolution being something that you work on with people together.
Yeah.
It might have been a vision that was born by a few people, but it's something that you've been able to share with people across the world, and for them to be able to take, to be able to interpret it into their own culture, their own society, to be able to, make it even more meaningful. Can you kindly tell us a little bit about, how you were able to grow that from sort of like a singular vision to, we even have a Fashion Revolution Nigeria. And, that's,
I know. Well, it grew really organically. So we started literally, I'm really not joking, we started with a group of adults sitting on a room discussing social media, hashtags, it was almost a little bit like a, Monty Python. It was a weird thing to be doing. But it started spontaneously as soon as we started communicating on social media. So, we are, as an organization, we are a child of our times. And these are the times that people can communicate everything, at the press of a button. And I guess that we really used this as an opportunity to make ourselves visible to others. But when people started coming to us, we realized that that really there was a genuine need to approach this conversation and approach it from a global standpoint. And we realized that the more people joined us, how we all had the same mission but different perspectives, and how the fashion industry operates in very different ways throughout the world. So we tend to think West does it best, and but we really wanted to hear from the reality, because for us it's about the supply chain, it's about the connection, it's about the people who make our clothes, where and in what conditions. So it's been a huge learning curve for us, but again, we've been blessed. All the country coordinators that have joined us over the years have proved to be remarkable individuals with an incredible energy and a real willingness to spend their time, to give their time for this cause, and we couldn't be more grateful. I can't think of anything more boring than doing things on your own and in isolation, and I don't think I've ever done anything completely on my own. So it felt instinctive to immediately bring as many people as we possibly could along the journey. And it still feels relevant when we speak to our country coordinators, how much we learn from each other and how important, it's like a sponge in between us, where you input and you breathe in all of this, the information, the culture, the history, everything that makes us all individual and special.
Oh, fantastic. I can see someone's just dropped a note. Hi, I'm country team member, Fashion Revolution Nigeria. Hello. So that's good. That's good. I'm really happy that we can be a part of the movement, because sometimes, being here and being in Nigeria, and I've always thought that, some of the things most that's widely spoken about today are things that's reflective of our practice in Africa and in Nigeria. So when we see people like yourselves begin to champion it and begin to, give it life, it's what's the word? We just say to ourselves, wow, this is quite interesting. This is something that we've been doing. So I'm not quite sure. I'm eager to see what people have to say, either through their questions, if they think that's validation, or if they think that that's just inspiring, that people all over the world also think, that a platform like yours supports or validates or, sort of gives life and more meaning to the work that they do. So I like the evolution from idea and concept to bringing people together under the umbrella of Fashion Revolution. Can you tell us how Fashion Open Studio came? What led to that? How did it evolve from having that revolution, that movement, to creating an opportunity for showcase for talent who sort of buy into or share a similar vision with you?
Well, it's been kind of came spontaneously. Sometimes it's difficult with Fashion Revolution because we've kept a pretty unique stand when it comes to campaigning. We don't really name and shame brands, which also means we don't thank them nor promote them. And at the same time, though, there is this kind of we see so much good, we see so much creativity, we see so many designers, particularly young and emerging from the whole world, that are genuinely employing their creativity as a service. And it felt limiting that we couldn't talk about those practices. So, fashion is a big conversation, from high street to the luxury, but it's very much in my DNA to work with young designers. I am a mentor for young brands globally, really, and it just feels that when there is something so incredibly good and brilliant and amazing that doesn't get any visibility simply because it's not a major brand, that it is a missed opportunity, that we can't see those people and meet those teams. So Fashion Open Studio really is a little bit defying the whole concept of a fashion week where you get the glamorous catwalk and, this kind of ton load of image, really, of style, but very little substance. And what we wanted was, we really wanted to speak with the designers, with their team, with the people who make their clothes. We wanted to find out what drives them and what excites them and what's their vision for the future. But from a manual, really from a fashion point of view, from making, because we know that it's not about the giants all the time. It's not about the hegemony of the big brands. Sometimes real innovation, real cultural shifts come from the smallest of practices, and that's what we want to see on a global scale. And again, I love Fashion Open Studio because it celebrates all things small, because it allows for this intimacy, and it's very non-judgmental. You don't need to have upscaled to God knows how many stores or how many press articles to be one of our heroes. And I think that this is really, really, really relevant right now. The one thing I feel will shift permanently as a result of the coronavirus is, who are our heroes? Who are the people that we will choose to be the ones that will influence us? I mean, we're looking at a whole generation of kids, the coronavirus kids, who will be brought up with a very different type of respect. These kids are growing up respecting the doctors, the nurses, the carers. These are different types of celebrities. And in a way, what we want to do with Fashion Open Studio, again, is to showcase the smaller realities that are making a valid difference and a valid contribution to the world of fashion, often very invisibly.
Oh, fantastic. That's so beautiful. And I think that's what, when the invitation came, it's quite interesting that when the invitation came to us to pitch to host a Fashion Open Studio, I was quite intrigued, by what it is, what it stands for, and quite pleased to find that, it's quite in tune with what we do for season one, our season one showcase, which has always been a more considered approach. Yeah. In October, you have the I don't even know, it's sort of big, the catwalk and the shows and models and, So this season has always been a bit more quiet. So it was something that we really want to do. And then with the coronavirus, we had to sort of adapt till we were here today. And I'm really quite pleased, because if we did change formats, we would probably not have had this opportunity or thought about, hosting a live event where we could, connect with you in real time and listen to you, sort of share your views and inspire us that indeed, or come on an exploratory journey with us into the world of fashion, craftsmanship, and artisanship from the continent. Yeah. So it would be great to find out from what you've seen thus far from some of the African brands, what are your thoughts about, because I personally think that African fashion in general has a slow approach, in the sense that, with the artisans and the craftsmanship and, weaving and our sort of practice, it doesn't encourage, that fast pace that the global fashion industry wants. It's also quite interesting that, because it's something that's been passed down from generation to generation, you often find, partners, communities, and collaborators almost, in places that a lot of people don't even know about or haven't heard about. And they're mindful of those processes. They're mindful of preserving the craft. They're mindful of, so it'd be great for you to share and let us know what you think about, what we do and what place and what role that plays with what you do.
Well, you said a really key word before. You said something quiet. Weirdly enough, I'm a really noisy person, but I love quiet. And you just really visualized everything that I think, in describing the way that this is a fashion that is passed down through generation. I'm also a rabid feminist, and I believe that fashion is female, but not in the kind of, female embroidery. Fashion is so closely linked with innovation. It's badass women that made this industry, the cottage industry, the craft of fashion. It's our hands, it's our time, our eyes, and our stories. And for me, having lost these cultural traditions is it's on par as the extinction of animals. That we are looking at the extinctions of crafts throughout the world, and yet they are the start of trade. They are the start of communication. And the aesthetics that they bring. The skill, the beauty. So I believe that the future of the industry is restoring this. And so, personally, I'm aesthetically inclined to like the bright, the colorful, the beautifully made, the texture. So, there are many African brands that I follow and that I am, really, really keen on. So I'd love to see the opportunity for these incredible talents to be celebrated outside of their region, outside of Africa, and for us to really, really learn. Another thing that interests me hugely is I'm very interested in upcycling as a technique, as a fashion technique. And I feel it's not just for an aesthetic reason, but it's because the art and the craft of reusing is something that people have been doing for millennia, and we each do it differently. So there is a lot of you can see these traditions being passed down in the way that people reuse autochthonous materials and bring them back into life in an object or in a piece of clothing. And I think that we are way more ahead in having lost all of this. And, that any opportunity that we have to reconnect with cultures via the way that they use their materials, to me, is incredibly interesting. So, for me, it's a huge, huge future that, that we're seeing, exploding in a way, this kind of the creativity. And the validation, I think, will come when we become more mindful, because the reality is that we're not there yet still. I mean, the fashion industry is still operating under West is best, and we all know well, and, you need to be this, and, unrealistic expectations. All I can say is that, Fashion Revolution is here to defy those expectations, to change them, so that we can really genuinely look back, to move forward and look at traditions and look at the huge richness of cultural traditions when it comes to the fashion that we wear, and make them more visible and more available to everybody else. That's real choice. I mean, choice to me is not a Zara store or an H&M store with just billions, or a luxury store for all it matters, with billions of different pieces of clothing. That's not choice. Choice is lots of small, different entities from all over the world, each finding their own style, their own solution, and their own way of making clothes.
Fantastic. And for me, you said something that we constantly reinforce and emphasize here, that it's not about looking for validation from the West. It's about doing something that we know, but it's about being true to ourselves. It's about being true to who we are. It's about being true to what our culture is, our heritage is. And I think that's why that's what sort of sets us apart to a significant extent, because there's all of that heritage, there's all of that beauty, there's the confidence that comes from knowing that this is something that we've done from generation to generation, and to be able to share that beauty with the world, where we're ready, so to speak, to to give it what it takes. That yes, this is our beauty, this is our interpretation of our past, this is our own interpretation of our culture, our heritage, and it tells a beautiful story of who we are and where we've all come from. But you said something that I found quite interesting. You said you don't think fashion is ready yet. I would have thought that you would be telling us or reassuring us that with the current situation now, with the pandemic, and with the way the whole industry has pretty much come to a halt. I think the other day, Net-a-Porter actually said they were not going to be shipping anymore, for now at least. I would have thought you would tell us that, or maybe it's something. There's some sort of seismic shift. There's a shift that's happening, and people are probably beginning to think that this is not the way to act, and that hopefully when we all come out of this pandemic, everyone will probably, I don't know, be more mindful. I was hoping you'd tell me that you think. Please don't tell me we're going to go back to how we used to be. Tell me that, please.
That's my heart. That's my heart, and our journey and our mission. But we do know from past experiences that unfortunately, often after a period of restriction, as I mentioned, comes this huge excess. And so we have to be strong. We have to be strong and ensure that we continue this on this journey together more than ever. For me, it's two words: it's empathy for each other and respect for our resources. And we can't forget that. So I think it's too early to see how we will deal with this shift. And I am really not a mind reader, and I hate because what if you get it all wrong? I can tell you that my heart sees the fact that we need to change, and hopes that the majority certainly of the people that I speak to, and that that are in my large community, I know that we all feel the same, but I know that the work isn't going to be necessarily easier at the end of this crisis, because people are losing their jobs, people are dying. We will be, when we do walk on the other side isn't necessarily going to be rosy. And as I said, I don't like to predict the future. I just like to walk steadily into the future, and I will continue to walk steadily into this future with a bigger baggage of the things that I have learned, and with a louder voice to tell people about the things that I have learned, and by bringing as many people along this journey so that we can all be witnesses to what we have learned. But I do think it's important to be realistic and not to imagine that we will just be picking up the pieces. That's the kind of fairy tale that that somehow we know might not necessarily happen. And fairy tales feel like you don't have to do the hard slog. While on the other hand, I think that we need to do, I think that the work will be intense at the end of this journey. But again, I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't have the massive privilege of mentoring young designers. And that is what gives me hope, because the more people I mentor, and there's quite a few at the moment, because also with Fashion Open Studio, we've been involved with the Festival, which has been postponed, and I'm also on the jury for the ITS competition in Italy. So I see these young guys coming up, and I trust them. I trust them completely. And that's why I think that, yes, the surge will be a positive one, and there will be a new generation that will have the strength of character to march forward fast. And the good thing is that we've seen one horrible thing. I mean, we've seen that our system is entirely based on profits over people, but we've also seen that people can come together for the greater good at a time of crisis. So I feel about finding a balance. I think we'll talk a lot about fashion, about this in the various Fashion Open studios. I know that the studio curator, Tamsin Blanchard, and I will really focus on this conversation, particularly with the young designers and their fears and what they're experiencing right now, but they're also the future. And, it seems it would be too facile, too easy to say, yes, there's your rainbow, there's your sunset, we shall all fly to it with some wings and possibly, in my case, bunny rabbit ears. I don't think it's like that. I think we really will need to be gritty and strong and relevant and urgent when we come out of this crisis.
Oh, thank you. Those words, they're really quite soothing, So resilience, grit, we need to stand firm and know that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the worst is behind us. There's still so much work to do. So with a sense of urgency, we need to keep marching forward. And to reiterate your words about the importance of making sure we have empathy for each other and respect for the environment, those are very, very important things that we need to consider in our daily practice, either as a journalist or an illustrator, whatever role, everybody, whatever, even the consumers, whatever role you play within the ecosystem, it's important that you're mindful. So this is really quite precious. I wonder if maybe you have questions for us at Lagos Fashion Week, so that this is not too one-sided, and then we'll open it to a Q&A for anyone in the audience.
I am super interested in your experience in having pivoted online. I mean, you're the first one. So, in many ways, I've been so involved in this conversation around changing fashion weeks, even though I'm a massive supporter of the minor fashion weeks, or the newer fashion week, call it this way, the ones that aren't the New York, the Paris, the London,
That's awesome.
Because I believe that there is a huge importance in keeping things local and in really emphasizing the work of local artists, artisans, and designers. But what's it been like? What's it like for you to have made this massive change from a really physical, fashion is quite physical, to having gone online completely?
So I must confess that it was quite challenging. I wanted to cancel completely. But we just thought that the topic and the focus and the theme for this season was so relevant to what's happening now with the pandemic. With it being themed woven threads, it's, the pandemic has more than ever before shown us or re-emphasized that, the one thread that binds us is our humanity. So it just seemed very wrong to take that, defeatist approach to say, oh, let's cancel it because we cannot do it the way we envisaged that we would do it, with an open event and people coming in and, all the fashion people wearing fancy clothes to experience this. So it took us a while, but I realized that what was most important out of this whole experience was the message. How do we, and that was what kept us going. And how do we ensure that we still look for a way to pass on the message, to share this message with people that, this is the future of fashion. How we're all interconnected and interwoven through our communities, through collaboration, through co-creation, And of course, with Debola's resilience as well, the project manager who kept saying, no, and Yegua, the curator, no, let's go back to drawing board. How are we going to make this happen? So we had a plan A, we had a plan B, we have C, D, E.
Yes, G. Familiar with that.
And we're just like, the one thing we said was, let's keep going, let's revisit it, and then we'll wait for the news to come on. Like, okay, so what's the government saying today? So based on that, we changed strategy over and over again. But the one thing, I'm glad that we all agreed was let's just try to keep it going. So I'm so pleased to have a team as well who really thought that this message, it was important to share this message this season, and let's see how it goes. Let's see what the future has in store.
We're watching you closely. We'll be asking for your guidance.
Oh well, I'm not quite sure, but let's see how it goes. So thank you. I'm looking at some questions. There was one from Bells 3891, and the question goes, how does a business reconcile sustainability with affordability?
Okay.
Sustainability seems, okay, it's right there. Can you see?
Yeah, no, I can't see it, but I heard it. So basically, I think it's a very easy reconciliation. Obviously, if the expectation is that you can buy something, you can only afford something that costs very, very little, such as cheap fashion. The point is to nevertheless consume it in a way that makes it last for a long time. I feel that at this point in time, young designers are confused with two main issues. One is, should I be making any product anyway? Because actually making product in itself is adding to a huge planetary burden. And the second one is, how can my hard work, which is hours and hours and hours of work, be affordable for somebody else who can't afford it? And the truth is that when it comes to the numbers, for me, as I said before, I don't want to slow down the work of young, creative, emerging designers. I want to slow down the ones that are overproducing. There are culprits in this, and there are innocent people. So, the young brands that are making out of care, of course, please keep making. And when it comes to affordability, I think, it's obviously, I don't know your audience or your followers, but it's everything else that's too cheap. So, we have to understand, we have to grow a generation that understands that happiness is not 10 pairs of trousers, but one that you love, that you cherish, that you care for, that you, look, here you go, this is a pair of trousers that was made by me, by a designer called Bethany Williams, and it's hand-stitched every little bit. I mean, would I ever want another pair of jeans, frankly? No. So it's that is what makes it important. I also believe that it is the responsibility of the big brands, the big high street brands, to rigorously make cheap fashion that is nevertheless made sustainably and ethically. So there should be enough for both. In an ideal future, the high street would be brimming with young designers and young systems, and just the fact that there are so many would potentially bring the price down. But we would also have, consumers that would understand hard work and quality and be prepared to pay for it, or save to pay for it, or buy it, between 4 or 5 friends and share that product that makes it cheaper.
Oh, fantastic. That's so true. And it's funny enough that one of my friends, Onye, and I were having a conversation yesterday, and she was talking about wardrobe and how to add to wardrobe. And they often tease me that I wear my clothes well, that I wear clothes that I've worn over and over again. And I was saying to her, of course I do. I keep my clothes well. And, for me, that's the joy, that I only buy what I absolutely love. Yes. But, it's something that's so precious to me that I know I can wear over and over again. I don't mind if I pay a little bit more than I would normally have at that point in time, but it's something that is so precious that, either in the way it's been made or who it was made by, or, if I was supporting, whatever the case might have been for making that purchase, is something that's so precious and probably needs to guide us, and not necessarily about, oh, I'm spending so much money on this, therefore it's valuable.
Exactly.
It's yeah. So that's fantastic.
Don't deny myself anything. I mean, if I have pieces of fast fashion in my wardrobe, which I wear and love and treat exactly the same as I would if they were designer. I mean, for me, if I love something, I love something. It doesn't matter. But the reality is that, we do have to invent different ways of buying. So whether it's collective buying, whether it's buying to share, whether it's experimenting with renting, because the saddest thing about this kind of, cheap fashion, bonanza that we've had over the last 35 years or so is that we've raised a generation that doesn't understand that quality. So they wouldn't know a good hem if it hit them in the face, to be frank.
Nope.
And so the reality, again, these young emerging designers have a treble job to do, because they also need to make those stitches safe. Those stitches need to seduce their new customers, and those stitches need to be beautiful enough to make somebody who's maybe young, maybe a student who really can't afford clothing, to understand the difference between that work and a piece of cheap work. And that's something we do a lot at Fashion Revolution, and Fashion Open Studio is one of our vehicles to really, really talk about that quality, really talk about the craft of fashion, in order to make people understand the difference.
And that's why I really like your theme for this season's Fashion Revolution Week. It's not just who made my clothes; it's what's in my clothes. So that's really quite engaging. And I remember sharing with them at the factory that, oh, guys, this is a new thing, and they were like, oh, that's so amazing, because it means not just factories, designers as well will be part of the conversation. They should tell us what's in the clothes, what's in the what's in the fabric or textile they've used, what sort of skill. It would be good to have that conversation that's beyond, because oftentimes everything gets lost in translation.
Totally.
You see the clothes on the runway, or you see the,
anything.
What else? Anything, whatever we do, but you never really know what's gone behind it. And I think it's a beautiful and unique way to storytell without necessarily going all out on a full budget to say, this is who we are, this is everything that's gone into designing this collection. But just tell us, on your page with the hashtag, what's in my clothes. So that's really something I'm looking forward to seeing.
Well, thank you. It's a new hashtag. So we have great hopes for it. We've seen it's being picked up already, and I think it's a really important conversation. It's like a very natural progression from who made my clothes, just getting deeper. I think one of the things we're trying to convey at Fashion Revolution, and particularly around this moment in time, is that so I don't like using the word opportunity, because when people are dying and suffering, I don't see this as an opportunity. I see this as the miserable situation that it is. But it is time for pause. We have, as you mentioned at the very beginning of this call, we have more time. And, why not become experts in that period of time? Why not really focus on the subjects that are of interest to you and delve deeper? So, really, if it's fashion, if that's your doodle, I mean, it's mine, but, really find out the whole narrative behind the clothing that is in your wardrobe, and find out how you can, treat them. Joan Crawford said, treat your clothes like the good friends they are. I really love that quote, and I think that this is something that we can use the time during coronavirus to deep dive into the clothes that we own already, and really genuinely understand how we can make a difference in the future.
Awesome. We're going to take a question by EMR_XO. How will the coronavirus pandemic affect the potential investment of startup fashion innovators?
Oh, God. That's right. I don't know that I can answer that question. I'm sorry. I am the creative director at Fashion Revolution, and I know very little about investment. So, again, wild speculation here. I believe that the investors of tomorrow will look for different values. And it's not, the return of investment is no longer just going to be monetary. It's going to be about overall wellness. I said a phrase a few years ago that I still stand by, that it's not enough looking for quality in the products we buy. We must ensure that there is quality in the lives of the people who make them. And I think that this is something that people will be looking at progressively in the future. Again, I talk about future, and I don't know when you say how the pandemic will affect investment, if you mean in the short term or in the long run. I think that in the short term it's going to be a bit shit, frankly. As I said before, I don't think we'll get out of this easily, but I do think that pandemics are I read a beautiful quote by Arundhati Roy saying that pandemics are a gateway to a new world. And I can't remember the full quote. I wish I had it by me, but I don't. But it definitely said something about, opening a new door, a gateway to something else, something different. And that I do believe, that is inevitable, that it will be different. And I hope that the investors of tomorrow are as brilliant as the designers of today, because that would be a match made in heaven.
Oh, fantastic. It will be. I think this is similar to the last one. How do we produce, Vida by Maria says, how do we produce cheap fashion but maintain luxury fashion? And how do you encourage or maintain luxury fashion in countries where many people don't have buying for those luxury prices?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
So this is one of the continuous complications that comes all the time. There is no easy reply. I mean, I think we need to redefine the word luxury. And at Fashion Revolution, we don't make much of a difference between fast fashion and luxury.
Yeah, and luxury.
Provided it's mass-produced, at the end of the day, luxury is hardly... It doesn't pay its garment workers any more than the high street. It doesn't pollute any less. So, we really need to keep it into context. What's luxury could be a really cheap product that's been embroidered by your hands full of love. And that doesn't necessarily have to cost the earth at the end of it. So, when I mentor designers, I do find exactly the way that they can, looking at their designs, looking at their collections. But, if I was a young emerging designers, and some of the young designers I teach to, for instance, one of the most inspiring young girls I met, she was at Central St. Martin. She was, her name was Angelica, and she was on a full scholarship at Central St. Martin's because she was the first in her family to have gone to university. She lives, local to me in South London. And, she's studying in one of the schools that's teaching top luxury in the world. And yet she's from a community herself who wouldn't be able to afford those clothing. So in our conversations, we discussed what it would be like for her to make her collections, to have them, marketed as the luxury collection that they will be when she does graduate, but how to make that product available cheaper always to her community or to people who can't afford it. When I was a designer and my shop was on Portobello Road, it was bang on the crossroads. On the left of me, everybody was super rich and super posh, and on the right of me, there were the council estates. And I loved when my brand went on sale, because the clients would come from the poorer side of the street and still be able to afford my product. And if somebody came who couldn't afford it, I would discount it even further. So my product was available to people who couldn't afford it, and I made sure that as a designer that was part of the ethos of the brand. So I think that there are ways that we can still, as designer, keep our signature and create those clothing for those people that can afford them, because we also need to be, you will need to be bought by those customers, but find ways to always remember your community and those people who can't afford it, and think of creative ways of making that product available for them.
Oh, thank you. That's a very good tip, to be able to carry everyone along. Longpe Ige, is there evidence of a rise in more symbolic consumption of fashion? And what ways, other than COVID-19, can such consumption behavior be encouraged? Wait, I'm trying to understand that. A rise in more symbolic consumption of fashion.
I'm not so sure whether symbolic. So I can tell you, I can link this with modern technology, if not symbols. But I went to a talk recently where, it was really utopia, but discussing the way that fashion will be, available online without being real. So if you have to pose 350 times a day on Instagram, each time with a different outfit, make sure it's actual. But I'm sorry, I wasn't so clear on the question.
No. I understand what you're saying, because I think I saw this post where you can sort of, put they created like patterns, so to speak, on humans, and then
like
you can
dolls.
paper dolls. Yes, that's what it's called.
I'm really interested in technology if technology can link with our instincts.
Yeah.
I understand the instinct of somebody that wants to wear 75 different outfits a day. Given the time, I probably would too. But obviously, mindfully. So for me, the idea of marrying modern technology in a way that we can still play with fashion without harming, that is the only symbolic consumption that I can think of that would be fun and I guess ethical.
Yeah, that's a really good example, because I've seen those paper dolls and I've been intrigued as well. Like, this could be fun.
In 5 years' time, this is just going to be all the rage. I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to that. So, Born Tired says, how will you consider the future of fashion in Lagos, especially when put in perspective our supply chain and the detrimental effect of this ongoing pandemic?
Okay, so this is why Fashion Revolution is so important, because I would not be able to answer that question because I am not, unfortunately,
part of Nigeria. So I will answer.
Okay, supply chain. But I'm here talking to you, and you are. So that's definitely your question. But it brings the point that we can't answer all questions for everybody and be all things for all people, and that we have to rely on the expertise of others in this world and communicate. So that's your question.
So Born Tired, I think for me the most important thing is for us to be more mindful of the need to create vertically integrated businesses. For the very first time in our lifetime, at least my lifetime, borders are closed, flights can't come into Nigeria. So invariably it means that if you don't produce it, if it's not already in the market before the closure, it means we cannot get it in. So does this mean that, all fashion businesses must come to a halt, complete full, stop, because we can no longer fly things from outside Nigeria? I don't think so. I think the future of fashion, and this is something we've consistently preached and advocated for, is that, we need to begin to explore how we can create businesses that's vertically sustainable. And if it means that cotton is the only thing that's available in Nigeria, maybe that's what we should look at. Maybe we should need to start experimenting how to make cotton become, put a bit of texture, put a bit of color, weave it, dye it, whatever it is because that's something that's truly ours, and that's something that we can, always find, around us. Of course, we also have the Asho case. Almost every community, almost every tribe in Nigeria has their own woven cloth. And it's interesting to see what a lot of people have been able to do with some of these fabrics, and some of them will be presenting their work at Fashion Open Studio. So for me, that is the future of fashion. Yeah. We need to look for how to create more and more vertically integrated businesses within Nigeria.
Absolutely. Smaller entities. I mean, I really believe that there is safety in numbers. This is what we need to see. This is what we need to re-see, this resurgence of your local, all of our global local realities, brought before for all of us to learn and share. I mean, it's so uniform recently. I can't wait until that creativity takes over. It's going to look amazing.
Very amazing. Very, very. So, Olana, yeah. Do you think haute couture will be affected heavily by all of these changes? And make sure haute couture will be affected heavily by all of these changes, and make sure that what's in the clothes don't harm the earth or enslave a child? And do you think there'll be an emergence of a new couture?
Yes, I think that there will be an emergence of a new couture for sure. I mean, so in fact, I'm glad you asked this question. I'm answering the second half first, and then the But I think that we are going to reframe what couture means, and I think that couture is really about the human hand. It's still niche because of we perceive couture as aspirational, super expensive, but I can defy that because there's some young brands that are working with found fabrics, found object, and turning them into couture, and that's unimaginable. You can't imagine that something just found, discarded by somebody, through the law of expertise and skill of a designer, can become a piece of couture. And I think that this is going to be huge. I do think that we will absolutely change the way that it's not all going to be about, diamantes and sparkle and shine. That we will give a totally different name to what couture is. And it really will be in the threads, in the stitches, in the craftsmanship, in the quality, in the heritage, in everything that we can bring back onto that piece of couture. COVID has affected the entirety of the fashion industry. Potentially the people who are least affected are the couture customers. But then I'm not one of them, and I don't really hang out with couture customers. I don't quite know from their yacht, hello, are you self-isolating? But the whole of the fashion industry will be affected by COVID, and I'm assuming couture as well. We've seen a really interesting example though today of very skilled garment workers making masks, for instance, or the fact that in Italy all of the doctors and nurses are sort of wearing Armani, Dolce & Gabbana and so on and so forth, because the luxury brands are really using their facilities to produce things that are needed at the moment. Yeah. So we hope that these very rich, very wealthy brands are at least putting their facilities to the service of the situation that we're seeing now. But everyone's affected. Couture, evenings wear, streetwear, everyone's affected.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Fashion and sustainability seem to be the responsibility of the designers. How can fashion consumers demand sustainable processes from the designers?
Fashion and sustainability is not just, in my opinion, the responsibility of the designers. There is a statistic that says that 80% of designs of sustainable solutions are found at the design table. But I'm not so keen on that because it's a lot to do with supply chain. It's a lot to do with corporate decisions. It's a lot to do with the bigger picture. I don't believe that there is only one sector of society that needs to take that responsibility. This is really all of us together. It's the governments, it's the brands, it's the corporations, and ultimately the citizens can demand. I was recently asked during a panel conversation by a 17 or 16-year-old girl who was constantly buying from the cheapest fashion brands, and she was saying to me, should I stop? And we don't advocate boycotting. So my reply to her was, okay, so if you have a skirt or a t-shirt or a top or a dress from a super cheap brand, wait until it breaks and then mend it. Or have someone mend it for you. And then take a picture of this mend garment and show it, tag the brand and show them and tell them, this is my skirt, my dress, my top, and it broke. And I don't want a replacement. I want my skirt because it was mine in the first place. So we can talk to brands. You can encourage brands to give you the better product that you wish to welcome in your wardrobe. But it does need to be a conversation because the brand needs to listen, and then the brand needs to pass that information on to their supply chain. So it's not anything that can be done in isolation. But of course, citizens have a very loud voice. And, at this moment in time, the louder the better.
Thank you very much. There's a question on HR that I think is quite interesting. It says corporate firing people is unethical, and tomorrow they go on talking about how they care for the world and sustainability. Does Fashion Revolution also ask brands to be transparent on their HR policy?
Absolutely. So if you check our Fashion Transparency Index, we will be publishing, I think it's the fifth or sixth year. Apologies, I don't remember, but we actually monitor the brand's responses to transparency and their public disclosure. So what they actually tell us about their business practices, and of course at HR level as well. We are aware of the fact that the current situation is, in other situations, is workers forced to work in very unhealthy and dangerous situation. So, for us, transparency is everything. It's the first step, the most important steps that brand need to do in order to, to show us their supply chain. So mapping their supply chain and, for us citizens to keep scrutinizing them. So yes, please have a look at the Fashion Transparency Index, and you can see Sarah Ditti, our policy director, is working really hard with her team to create the 2020 Fashion Transparency Index. But yes, please have a look at what we mean.
And where can we find this? Is it on your website?
www.fashionrevolution.org/thing Fashion Transparency Index.
Oh, great. And who can contribute to it? Is it something that's open to every brand, every company, or is it targeted?
No, it's targeted because obviously we're looking at brands with a certain turnover. We can only do, I think this year they're going crazy, doing 200. Last year it's 150 brands. But as I said, it's a brilliant instrument. It's primarily really designed for the industry, but it's widely used by consumers as well. And, the methodology is very accurate. The way that, the questions that we ask are pretty intrusive. We're not easy, and nobody has ever scored further than 60%. So, it's a very stringent document, rigorous, but yes, do have a look at it. It's super interesting.
Thank you so much, Orsola, for joining us today. It's been, really, really such a pleasure gleaning from your experience, your wisdom, and just, listen to you tell us about Fashion Open Studio and the amazing work you and the team are doing. Thank you, because it's very encouraging to me, and I'm hoping my team is listening as well, that, we're on our way there, and with a bit more resilience, grit, determination, and, a deeper understanding that it is going to be hard work, especially now. So we're ready to keep going, and hopefully we can all see the future that we hope to see. Thank you so much.
I'm super grateful for you for having invited me, and I know that we will keep on seeing each other on these really weird phones or iPads or whatever. I just saw a question this second saying, "Is Fashion Revolution?" But we're going fully digital, just so that you all know. You can follow us on Instagram at FashRev, and you can follow at Fashion Open Studio for all of the Fashion Open Studio news. But yeah, we will really, really be around. We will be around for everybody, so stay with us and
thank you.
Follow in Fashion Revolution.
And we hope to be able to share this, session as well on a wider note for other people that were not able to be a part of it. Thank you so much, Orsola.
Thank you so much, and lovely talking to you.
Same here. Take care.